It was late, around 3 a.m., as I drove back home from a work meeting that had dragged on. This was an annual meeting that took place 8 hours away from where I worked. Driving through this state is terrible because, outside the city, it's basically just farmland, miles and miles of crop fields as far as the eye can see. At least, with the empty roads, I could zone out and focus only on moving forward. However, out of nowhere, I noticed a huge gap in the crops to the right of the road. As I passed by it, I saw a car wedged right in the middle of the crops, as if it had veered off the road and couldn't stop. It wasn't something I expected to see, but I couldn't understand how getting into a crop field could really be harmful to someone or have caused something significant enough for me to have to seek help. There was still a cell signal there, so they could definitely call for help themselves. The car wasn't running either, which made me think they had already been rescued or something like that. I kept driving, and just a minute or two later, a pair of headlights appeared ahead of me. Within seconds, I was approaching them extremely fast and had to swerve into the other lane to pass them. The speed limit was 80 on this highway, and that car shouldn't have been going more than 25, which was insanely dangerous. Almost as soon as I passed them, they started accelerating, visibly getting closer every second, until they were right behind me. I thought it was just one of those ego-obsessed jerks who can't handle being passed on the road, so I assumed he would just speed up and go on his way. But instead, he veered into the oncoming traffic lane and positioned his car right next to mine. I looked over and saw a man staring me in the eyes, but strangely he didn't seem angry. He had a slight smile on his face, and that was it. He looked to be in his mid-40s, with slightly long hair and stubble. I looked back at the road, feeling a bit nervous. The car next to me then accelerated and cut in front of me, braking sharply and forcing me to do the same, before turning the car to block both lanes and stopping right in the middle of the road. I managed to stop about 15 meters from them, in shock, not understanding the gravity of what was happening. The man wasted no time, immediately got out of the car, and ran straight towards me. There was no effort to hide his intentions, as he held a gun in one hand and now had a hood covering his head. I didn't have time to go into reverse, so I just floored the accelerator and swerved off the road, into the crops on someone else's farm. For a moment, my car kept moving forward without letting me turn, starting to slow down even with the accelerator pedal fully pressed. In that instant, my heart sank and a wave of terror washed over me, thinking about the other car I had seen stuck in the crops. But suddenly, the wheels gained traction again, and I managed to swerve back onto the road, hearing a single distant shot as I fled. I called 911 and gave specific details about what happened, along with telling about the car I had seen stuck in the crop field. Whoever that man on the road who tried to stop me was, he was never found. The police managed to locate the other car, but it was empty, with no signs of the driver. It was as if they had simply veered off the road, gotten stuck, and then disappeared. And who knows what happened after that. Their situation was eerily similar to what would have happened to me, but if I had also gotten stuck, then the other person in that car probably wouldn't have been the only one to disappear that night. After the incident, I could barely drive the rest of the way home, my mind spinning trying to process what had almost happened. Every headlight I saw in the rearview mirror made my heart race, fearing it was that man or someone like him. I arrived home exhausted but grateful to be safe, although the feeling of security had been deeply shaken. In the following days, the police continued their investigation, but with no solid leads or witnesses, there was little they could do. The abandoned car in the crop field had no useful fingerprints or evidence that led to a suspect. The account that had requested the delivery, assuming it was a planned ambush, was, like in my case, a disposable account with no real information to trace. I wondered about the fate of the driver of the abandoned car, if they had met the same fate I almost did, or if somehow they had escaped. And about the man on the road, who was he? A thief? A psychopath looking for victims on isolated roads at night? Or perhaps something even more sinister? I decided that driving at night, especially in isolated areas, wasn't worth the risk. The experience left a permanent mark on me, a reminder of how quickly a normal situation can turn into a nightmare. I shared my story with friends and family, warning them about the dangers of deserted roads at night and the importance of staying vigilant. The fear I felt that night never completely left me. Whenever I pass by a deserted road or see a car parked suspiciously, a shiver runs down my spine. But I also feel stronger, in a way, knowing that I managed to escape from a potentially deadly situation. I hope that sharing my story can prevent others from experiencing the same terror, and that somehow we can all be a little safer, a little more aware of the dangers that surround us, even in the most unexpected places. I drive part-time for Uber Eats. As a college student, it's a great job to fit around my class schedule. This happened one night, after my classes, around 11 p.m. I didn't have class until late the next afternoon, so I planned to stay up late and make as many deliveries as possible. At 1 a.m., I received a rare grocery order to pick up at a 7-Eleven and deliver to an address 15 minutes away. The directions took me through some neighborhoods, going to the end, which led to a path that went into the woods, before stopping at the end of a gravel road. I looked at the address on the app, and it said it was around there, but all I saw were construction cones and things, with no streetlights. I cautiously continued, turning on my high beams and navigating until I reached the last curve. This was even more suspicious, being more of a path than a road. I looked at the map more closely again, and it clearly told me the address was around there. I looked up and peered further down the path, and as my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I began to notice a structure at the end. It looked like a house, but there was definitely something strange about it. Then, I looked around and started to notice more houses. There wasn't enough light from my headlights to see them clearly, but from what I could make out, it seemed to be a community of newly built houses. With that in mind, I figured, since the house in my GPS was one of the first ones on the path, maybe it was already finished. I turned and started to proceed, entering an empty cul-de-sac with only one house on it. Up close now, it was definitely not finished, at least not entirely. The front of it looked almost ready, having a door and everything, which made all of this really hard to understand. In the end, all I had to do was deliver the stuff where I was told, without worrying about someone's housing situation. I parked and got out with the groceries, walking up to the front door and knocking. All the lights were off, and it was completely silent, enough to make me a little uneasy. I left the bags and turned to walk back to my car, but out of the corner of my eye, I saw something move in the trees. I stopped for a moment, staring into the darkness of the forest. Whatever I saw wasn't moving anymore. I started walking quickly, getting into my car and starting it. As soon as the headlights came on, I saw a man standing exactly where I had seen the movement in the forest. He was looking in my direction, watching intently as I started to reverse. My heart raced as I looked at the man and didn't pay attention to the road. I backed up only about 3 meters before feeling a huge jolt in the rear tires, followed by the front ones. It was enough to make the car sway back and forth for a second, but my adrenaline was so high that I couldn't even see properly what had caused it. I accelerated, getting off the path and back onto the gravel road. Once back in the normal neighborhood, it became more obvious that my car was shaking and swaying, and there was no doubt that I had multiple flat tires. I managed to stop somewhere I felt safer and then called the police. They investigated the address and the Uber Eats account, but the address was an unfinished property that wasn't inhabited, and the account was disposable. They found several large, sharp metallic objects on the path, likely placed after I entered, in an attempt to make me stop on the way. What they were trying to do once they got me stuck there in the forest is hard to say. Maybe rob me or maybe something worse, but at least I didn't have to find out. It was one of those moonless, dark nights where darkness seems to swallow everything around you. I was heading home after a long day of work, driving on the back roads of the United States, far from the hustle and bustle of cities and the light of street lamps. The silence was unsettling, interrupted only by the sound of the engine and the wind cutting through the night. The roads I chose to drive on were known to be sparsely populated during the day and virtually deserted at night. It was a shortcut I often used to get home earlier, despite warnings from friends and family about the dangers of driving alone in these isolated areas, especially after midnight. But convenience always trumped fear, until that night. I was about halfway there when the headlights illuminated something unusual on the side of the road. At first, I thought it might be animals crossing, which wasn't uncommon in that region. But as I approached, I realized they were dolls. Yes, dolls. Dozens of them, of various sizes and shapes, all positioned as if they were watching us pass by. Some hanging from trees, others sitting on logs, and still others standing, staring directly at the road. A feeling of discomfort washed over me, but I pressed on, trying to convince myself that it was just a tasteless prank or some strange local tradition I was unaware of. Still, I couldn't help but glance in the rearview mirror. That's when I saw a figure moving swiftly towards the dolls. My heart raced, but I forced myself to believe it was just my imagination. A few kilometers ahead, the unexpected happened. My car began to slow down, as if it were running out of fuel, but the gauge indicated that the tank was almost full. I tried to accelerate, but the car didn't respond. Then, everything went completely dark. The headlights went out, the engine died, and the nighttime silence became deafening. With the car now stalled in the middle of the road, and no cell signal to call for help, the sense of vulnerability was overwhelming. I decided that the only option was to get out and check the engine, despite the fear that the darkness and silence inspired. As I opened the car door, a cold breeze hit me, carrying with it a strange smell, something metallic, almost like blood. With the flashlight from my phone in hand, I walked towards the hood of the car, trying to ignore the fear urging me to turn back. That's when I heard the sound of footsteps approaching from behind me. I turned quickly, but there was no one there. The sound had stopped. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I decided it was best to return to the car and wait until dawn, but as I turned around, I saw, in the light of my phone's flashlight, one of the dolls I had seen before on the road. Except now, it was on the hood of my car, staring at me with its empty eyes. At that moment, panic consumed me. I ran back to the car, locking the doors and trying to start the engine again. To my surprise, it started on the first try, as if nothing had happened. I didn't wait a second longer. I accelerated as much as I could, leaving behind the doll and that strange stop. The fear of looking again in the rearview mirror consumed me, but curiosity got the better of me. Taking the risk to look, I saw no more doll or any sign of the figure I thought I had seen. Just the dark road stretching out behind me, swallowed by the night. With each passing kilometer, the tension eased a little, but the feeling of being watched remained. I knew that the stories about that road weren't just local tales to scare travelers. There was something truly sinister about that place, something I had the misfortune of encountering. This happened some time ago. I was heading home after a long day of work in the city. My house is in the suburbs, a considerable distance outside the city, so every day, after leaving at 10 p.m., I had an hour's drive. Much of the journey is on empty roads, once I leave the city, so it's not so bad, except for the time it consumes. I was a little more tired that night, which wasn't for any specific reason, but it was just one of those days. I was only half an hour from home, driving on one of those quieter back roads, when, through the dim streetlights, I saw something blocking the road. My eyes widened, and I eased off the accelerator as I approached. The fog cleared enough for me to see what it was, a tree fallen across the entire road. I looked at it for a moment, puzzled. There hadn't been any recent storms or strong winds, and it wasn't there in the morning when I left. I left the car running, but in neutral, got out, and looked around. There were no other fallen trees or signs of any other damage. As I stood on the road, next to the tree, a light suddenly turned on from the other side, shining through the branches and leaves. It wasn't from an approaching car, as the car should already have been there and, for some reason, only now turned on its headlights. As I tried to look through the branches to see what it could be, I heard a door open and close, and then footsteps approaching from the other side of the tree. "Hello?" I called out, hoping to ease the tension a bit. I heard someone mutter something, but not exactly in response to me, more to themselves. I thought maybe they were also frustrated with the blocked road, but then the branches began to move and the leaves rustled, as a man began to climb the tree. I took a few steps back, closer to my car, as he jumped to my side of the road. From what I could see, he was a man with stubble and very short-cut hair, wearing a thick jacket. He looked at me and began to approach, still not having answered. I quickly got into my car, unsure of what the man was doing, but I began to have a really bad feeling in my stomach. He started walking faster, almost in a light trot. As soon as I closed the door, the man came very close to the window and looked at me. No smile or friendly face, just an empty and blank expression as he knocked on the window. "What do you need?" I asked nervously. The man didn't respond, but continued muttering to himself as he looked me in the eyes and continued knocking on the window. I kept asking what he wanted, but he didn't stop knocking and started to become more aggressive, banging on the window with his fist. I quickly put the car in reverse and backed out, hearing a dull sound on the door, probably from the handle being torn from his hands. After hearing that, I knew it was even more dangerous than I initially thought. I spun the car around and drove off, so focused that I didn't even check my rearview mirrors to see what the man was doing. Once I reached the detour, I stopped and reported the situation. As you can imagine, the man and his car were not found. I don't know much more about the situation, having only what happened to me as reference, but I know that the workers sent to clear the fallen tree said it had been deliberately cut. This even made the news due to the malicious intentions behind it, but nothing more was discovered. Whether the man I encountered was the one who cut the tree is unknown, but the fact that his car was there and the very strange way he was behaving makes me think so. In the following months, I had no further incidents along that route, but I still find myself fully awake, even on days when I'm tired, every night when I drive home from work on that road. It was a Friday night, and I was returning from a business trip, driving along a long rural road in the United States. The clock was already nearing midnight, and the moon was hidden behind dense clouds, making the darkness almost palpable. I was eager to get home, see my family, and finally rest after days of exhausting meetings. The road was notoriously deserted, especially at night, and rarely did another vehicle pass by. This always gave me a sense of isolation, but also of tranquility, being able to drive in peace without the usual interruptions of heavy traffic. As I drove on, the only illumination came from my car's headlights, cutting through the darkness. That's when something strange happened. The headlights began to flicker and then went out completely, leaving me in the most complete darkness. I tried to turn them back on, but to no avail. The car was still moving, so I slowed down, trying not to panic. That's when I noticed a faint light in the distance, seeming to be from a flashlight, moving slowly alongside the road. With not many options and needing help, I decided to stop. Perhaps it was someone who could offer me assistance. I parked the car as carefully as possible on the side of the road and got out, calling out to the person holding the flashlight. There was no response. The light just kept moving, as if guiding me. Curious and somewhat desperate, I decided to follow. What I didn't realize at that moment was how far from the car I had walked, following that mysterious light that always seemed to be a little further ahead, never getting closer. Suddenly, the light stopped. And, in the silence that followed, I could hear whispers around me, as if several voices were speaking at once, but I couldn't understand what they were saying. A chill ran down my spine, and the atmosphere became oppressively dense. When I finally looked up, searching for the source of the light, it disappeared, leaving me in complete darkness once again. Now, I was truly lost, not knowing the way back to my car or how to proceed. That's when the headlights came on by themselves, revealing a scene that left me paralyzed with terror. Before me, there was a circle of old porcelain dolls, all facing me, with grotesque expressions painted on their faces. And behind them, a tall, shadowy figure, silently watching. I don't remember how, but I managed to run back to the car, tearing away from there as fast as possible. Looking in the rearview mirror, the road behind me was empty, as if none of that had ever happened. Since that night, I avoid driving on rural roads after dark. Something on that road marked me, leaving a permanent reminder that in the shadows, mysteries lurk that the light of day will never reveal. And some lights, I discovered the hard way, are better left unheeded. Hello everyone, I sincerely hope you found today's video enjoyable and engaging. If you enjoyed the content and are eager to discover more similar material, please remember to subscribe to our channel and click the like button on this video. Your support plays a significant role in our ability to continue producing content and means a lot to us. I'm also looking forward to hearing your feedback on the video, so please don't hesitate to leave your comments in the section below. Your input is crucial to help us tailor our content to what you most enjoy watching. Until we meet again, please take care and stay safe. And always remember, it's a joy and an absolute privilege to share these moments with you.